So I don't know how long this episode is going to be, and it's something I've wanted to talk about for a long time, and it's a serious issue, and it may be triggering for some of you. So here we go. And I'm not talking about it for those reasons, but by the time you have heard this, you may have seen the Substack article I wrote about James Gunn. But let me start with my childhood. So I always had an interest in performance. I always had an interest in performing ever since I was a kid. I was also very interested in the tech things. So when I found my way to a camp called French Woods Festival, which has an incredible history of alum. But when I discovered this place, it filled a gap for me personally that I could not get throughout the school year. I was able to get maybe some of it, but not the performance, not the theater, and certainly not the level of tech. So I discovered it after trial and error with so many other camps. And what was meant to be 6 weeks turned into 9 weeks, and it was 9 weeks every summer. And every 3 weeks, we would put up a dozen theatrical productions at a level that would blow your mind. I mean, from an orchestra pit, to everybody being off book, to full-scale sets, and so on. Now, why do I tell you all this? Because I grew up with a whole bunch of people who would go on to different places in this world. And because of what I'm going to talk about, I'm not going to name any of these people because I don't want to lump any of them into this. But I'll talk about one gentleman who was a director who would come into the bunk and he would sit on the top bunk bed. And again, I'm giving you your last warning. This is jarring stuff. I mean, we're talking about child abuse, okay? That's really where I'm going here. And he would sit on the top bunk, and there was this kid, and I just had to catch myself that I almost said his name, the kid's name. You know, obviously, this was years ago. I was about 12, but you're still kids. This director, who probably was in his 20s, mid-20s, if I had to guess, maybe even a little bit older, would sit on the top bunk, and this kid, who had hair curlier than mine, longer than mine, he would run his fingers through his hair. And I found it very, very disturbing. Very, very disturbing. But nobody said anything. Not the camp counselors, not the other kids, not myself. I didn't even know how to really digest what was going on. This particular individual was so prominent in the camp, in the ecosystem of this theater camp, that there was a theater named after them. So I remember getting, because this person directed me in some plays, I remember getting Christmas cards off year from your favorite director, thinking, how does this guy have my address? Very creepy. And then we find out that he's fired. And the rumors start swirling. This is years into going to camp, by the way. This isn't a one-and-done thing. I should pull back on that, right? So I went to this camp from the age of 12 till the time I was a camp counselor. And so somewhere around the time that I'm probably, I don't know, been there 5 years, I hear that this guy's gotten fired. And this is somebody that, again, was revered. And I guess he picked the wrong kid to abuse because they worked in the office. And it set off a chain reaction. So I hear that this individual is fired. And I go and immediately tell a friend of mine because I'm shocked, because how could this guy be fired? What happened? What's the story? I don't know anything. Somebody overhears me, somebody who I also looked up to and admired. And the next thing you know, I find myself in the cafeteria surrounded by 4 or 5 grown men. And again, I don't even know how old I was. Maybe I was 15, maybe I was 16. I really don't know. but I was still young. And these guys are maybe 10 years older than me at the time. And in my mind, they're probably even older, right? Because when you're that young, everybody looks older, and it's a whole thing. So I'm now surrounded by a bunch of guys who I looked up to, who worked there as counselors or theater directors or department heads. And they are saying, what did you say? Who did you say it to? And they're questioning me, and they're intimidating me, and they're telling me not to repeat anything I said, anything I heard. It's not true. And they're basically bullying me into silence. Now, there was one individual who I worked alongside with who was probably of their age, who was not there in that moment. And I remember thinking, wow, their reaction to this seemed a little off, because they were very, very taken aback, but it didn't feel right, and it didn't feel genuine. And I didn't question it. I did question it, but I didn't question it out loud. So life moves on, and it was disturbing. And I'm sure there are other instances in my life, if I really dug deep enough, that I could cite that were similar. And I can't say that I have ever been on the receiving end of anything like this, but I also can't say that I haven't been, because as we start to talk about this, I can think of instances when I was much younger with female counselors in a different camp, in a different ecosystem, that may even qualify. But that's not what I'm here to talk about, right? What I'm here to talk about is the truth about James Gunn. And I remember when I moved to LA, I remember reconnecting with some people, one of which I just mentioned. And I'm trying to keep this very loose because you can look these people up. And anyway, I reconnected with them. And next thing you know, I'm kind of like working with one of them, but not the other one. And I'm more friendly with the other one. But the bottom line is, one of them at this point had gotten very close to James Gunn. And I would hear, and this is even prior to James getting the Guardians job, and I would hear all about how he was fighting to get the Guardians job, and how, you know, he was whining and crying with his agent because he had some web series rather that involved a raccoon, and he was like, okay, so that's enough for me. I should have the job. So he kicked and he screamed, but he was the trauma guy. And anyway, so I know somebody who latched on to him, and this is somebody who I worked with briefly, and this is somebody who I really am thinking before I speak on this. This is somebody who not only did I work with briefly, but in hindsight, some of the themes of the things they were doing were problematic. And if you have read the Substack article and you look at the imagery there, the themes are corollary. But I'm only here to spit fact and truth that is verified either by my own eyes or elsewhere, like a tweet, right? So, you know, fast forward, Gunn is working for Disney. He's doing the Guardians of the Galaxy, which I will note, he did not write the first Guardians of the Galaxy movie. Nicole Perlman, a woman by the name of Nicole Perlman, developed the script for about a decade, and Gunn came in and just did a facelift on it and took all the credit. And I don't even think she gets a writing credit. I think he took that off of her. And he traded off of that. And if you look at the actual decline in quality on the second script, you can see where it's his writing. I mean, this is the guy that made Scooby-Doo a villain. But I'm not saying this stuff because I'm like bitter about it. I'm just saying it because I'm calling it out. And part of me, I must have some sort of guilt because I witnessed or at least was privy to a lot. And I don't understand how we've gotten this far. And there's a Superman movie coming out and this has all been forgotten. And I also don't like the hypocrisy. So, not saying that I'm not a hypocrite in life, but when it comes to this kind of stuff and we're talking about child abuse and potential pedophilia, I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, there really should be no middle ground, right? This is an absolute full stop problematic issue. So he gets fired from Disney. Fast forward, James Gunn gets fired from Disney for a bunch of tweets around child abuse and pedophilia. And then there's all the outcry. Now, at the same time as this is happening, I know someone who I may have just been talking about, who, and again, I'm trying to keep this loose for a variety of reasons, but I know someone who I was dealing with at the time who was working with someone in the photo on my Substack. So it was kind of jarring when I went to source the photo thinking I was going to see James Gunn to see such a familiar face. But James Gunn gets the plug pulled on him, and this is the same time that I had done the Trump crank call, and I'm heading to Comic-Con because the person that I'm riding with is going to Comic-Con off of the fumes of this Trump call, as crazy as that sounds, and this other person is now driving back and packing up from Comic-Con. And again, I'm trying to blur the line slightly, because their associations at James Gunn has shut down their project. And it is one of these things where you're so close to it, there's nothing you can do about it. But here I am with this movie coming out and like, wow, we are so short-sighted. So I'm deciding to put all this on file here as a supplement to the article. So all of this comes out, but here's what I had already known, okay? They're talking about these photos like they're old. They were during his time. They were during his time at Disney. I saw those party photos from someone who went there, who wore a beanie, like one of those multicolored beanie propeller kids hats, and dressed up like a child and went to those parties and bragged to me. And I looked at them sideways and then showed me the photos on their phone. So when all of this broke and Disney fired James Gunn, he got away with it saying he was being a provocateur, and he also got away with it, and Disney got away with it by saying it all was prior to working for him. It was all before working for them. But it wasn't, because these people I keep referencing were involved in Guardians adjacent projects, and that's as much as I'm going to say on that, okay? But it's all truth. So I don't even think you can touch me legally because I'm only speaking truth. So anyway, this individual shows me pictures, and now there's speculation out there about James Gunn's association with some band who are self-proclaimed pedophiles and all of this. And I would say park all the speculation to the side, and let's just look at the truth. The man has a series of tweets, okay? He's claiming it's to be a provocateur, but during his time working for Disney, he's throwing, and they weren't to catch a predator parties, okay? Those were different parties, because he did these parties for years, and there's a whole circle of people in Hollywood, names you would recognize, who went to these parties, because I know people who went to these parties who would tell me who was there. And I saw the photos on the cell phone, okay, before I ever saw them on Twitter. But the story was murky enough that he skirted by. These parties were happening, and the particular party that I'm thinking of with the beanie and the propeller, and again, I didn't go to these parties, so I wasn't even invited, but that's not the point. It's not like I wanted to go. I worked with these people at a certain point in different capacities, and I find this abhorrent, and that's why I'm shedding light on it. Because as I say in the article, how does this guy get to define something like Superman, which is supposed to be so important to our culture, just in terms of values, right, and what it represents, or at least it was. Maybe not in today's world, maybe not today's version of Superman. All right, but this guy's a problem, because if you just look at the truth, all of these tweets, all of these topics about child abuse and pedophilia, all right, holding these parties during his time at Disney, and I have verifiable proof from people that went to these parties. Okay, and he claims that it's to be a provocateur, but there's no audience at these parties. You're doing this for your own amusement. So I don't even have to look at any of the things that are being suggested. I can just look at those two pieces right there. I don't even need a third, okay? And there are many other speculative things I could say, but I got to be careful, right? But just knowing those two things, the tweets that he put out there and the types of parties he's choosing to have in private during his time working for Disney, not that timing should matter, but it was, in fact, during his time working for Disney. Those two are problematic enough to ask, why do we allow this, especially in an industry that prides itself on being progressive, liberal, however you want to characterize it? How are we allowing a guy like this to hold the keys to Superman? Now, He was exposed by Breitbart. He was exposed by Michael Chernovich, a guy who I have a history of going toe-to-toe with before. People don't know that. Michael doesn't know it because I was backing up somebody else and producing them. All right, but in this case, Chernovich was right. He was right, and I have the proof. The proof is my own eyes. The proof is my own experiences. It's literally somebody I've known my entire life who went to these parties with somebody else who I've known my entire life as well. And I do not talk to these people anymore. I have not talked to these people, and I probably associated with one of them far longer than I ever should have in hindsight. But that's the truth. So here we are with this Superman movie, and James Gunn, the con artist that he is, okay, the disgusting, vile entertainer that he is. It's sinful. It's absolutely sinful that we can't stop this kind of insidious, I would say, how do I want to phrase that? I think it's dangerous that there's no way to stop. It's dangerous that it exists. It's problematic that we don't have a means to stop this sort of insidious behavior from seeping into our culture. Because here's what happens, right? It's not just James Gunn. It's the Bryan Singers and the Brett Ratners. These are the people that are being given the keys to our media that is supposed to influence a culture. And I'm not the kind of person that advocates for Christian media or any of that, and I could do a whole episode on those kind of things. All right? But I do look at what we're discussing with James Gunn, and I do have to ask, how do we stop it? Okay? I know how we allowed it, all right, because it was the height of the Me Too movement. And it was prior to that we allowed it because everybody was turning a blind eye to a lot of open stories. I could tell you stories about things that I know that I've heard, and maybe I will at some point, but I could tell you stories from other people I've worked with who have completely turned a blind eye in real time to crimes committed by people you all know and some of you would love, or say you love, I should say. You wouldn't love them if you knew them. You know, and we're talking about the Bill Cosbys, right? We're talking about the quote-unquote heroes, the people we look up to. And all I'm suggesting here is a guy like James Gunn who has the keys to Superman. All I'm suggesting here is that we should revisit the question of how do we stop this. I don't think you'll ever hear him refute the true allegations that he held these parties while he was working for Disney. He'll never refute the allegations of associating with the type of people and holding the type of parties he did. He will always use the cheap pass as being a provocateur. But when you're doing things in your private life, I'll say it again, there's no audience. And I would not be surprised if he's still up to the same old antics. All right, this is a guy that has failed upwards. He is, as been said to me by people that know him personally, he is the height of narcissism. He is only interested in furthering himself and people that can further him, and he will kick and scream and whine and cry until he gets his way. Now, separately from that, I think it's problematic that a CEO is also directing a film for the company. How is that not a conflict of interest? So if I were shareholders at Warner Brothers, okay, if I were shareholders, if I was David Zaslav, I would be taking a hard look at the opening weekend for Superman, and I would ask myself, is this thing really going to make enough money, or is it making enough money for us to double down on this guy, or is it time to get rid of him? Is it time to do what should have never been done and ostracize him? Or what was never done, what should have been done in the first place, forgive me. It's a very hard subject for me, because it exposes a lot of things in my personal life. And again, I mean, I was really shook when I sourced that photo because I did not expect to see somebody in it. And so I'm just kind of just dumping it all out here raw, and I'm not going to edit it. I'm not going to filter it. I'm just telling you the truth. It's not going to be a long episode because it doesn't need to be. I've said what I've said. But the bottom line is everything he was fired for is true. Okay? And the only thing that wasn't true was the timing. The timing of he, I know for a fact, held those types of parties while the music video that came out with Guardians 2 was being filmed. Unless it was Guardians 3. Whatever the stupid see, I don't want to get I'm flying too close to the sun here. But there was a music video. All right, there was a Guardians music video on social media. and all parties that I have mentioned were involved in said project, which is the only way that I can verify without researching it further, because I don't need to, because I remember the project and it was a Guardians project, and for those reasons alone, I know about the party because it was all at the same time, if that makes sense. And if it doesn't, it's still true because I'm just talking off the top of my head and it's some crazy shit. I'll never forget. I mean, he showed me the photos from the party, like, and he was bragging that he dressed up the way he dressed up, and I'm like, this. Why are like who thinks it's fun to go to a party themed based on anything surrounding child abuse? Who thinks that child abuse is a costume to be worn? And I will admit that the person that wore that beanie with the propeller is somebody that I continued to work with for a few more years. Okay, a few more years before going our separate ways. And if I'm being really, really transparent, and I tend to do that, the only reason I finally threw in the keys with that person is because it was for all the wrong reasons. It was for selfish reasons. I should have cut my ties with that person when I saw those photos, because I should have said, how disgusting are you? Because I remember the look on your face way back at camp when that guy got fired, and I'll never forget how you pretended to think it was horrible, and now here you are wearing that same level of abuse as a costume. It's not a long episode, folks. I don't really have anything else to say about it. It's just the truth, okay? It's just the truth. This is under the influence for a reason. James Gunn is a very powerful person in Hollywood, and it's not his talent, because he's talentless. It's only because of the power that he has accrued that it is forgiven. And I would ask an industry that prides itself on left-leaning ideology to take a harder look at the situation. There's no reason why this guy should have the keys to any franchise, anything in our culture, especially stuff that kids are digesting. It's just diametrically opposed to everything that the left says they stand for. Now, I know a lot of folks and I'm not trying to politicize it, but it becomes politicized by default. And there's a lot of folks on the right who can't stand it either. But guess what? Everything I'm telling you about James Gunn, I could tell you about some of your favorite people one day. All right? Because they turn a blind eye. They turn a blind eye. And when you get into the Brett Ratners, and when you get into the Steve Mnuchins, and you get into the Tom Barracks, and you get into the Ron Burkles of the world, and you get into all of the Rob Lowe's, you get into a certain level of power where these people are functioning and doing things behind closed doors that you can all go Google and read. Excuse me, you can all go Google and read it. But they're making these deals, they're brokering these things behind closed doors, they're working with people and doing things that, even though the information is out there, people are not getting it. People are not getting it. And I'm not saying that any of those people are child abusers or pedophiles. What I'm saying is they're trafficking in the same circles. They're trafficking in the same circles. And when you get to that level, suddenly, the people that an Ian Carroll likes to point out, they're running in the same circles as his co-hosts. They're running in the same circles as people in Trump's orbit. There's no longer right or left. There's no ideology when it comes to money and power. And you see that with the Diddy case too. So it's kind of something beyond politics, but I think we are so divided and we are so relegated to our corners and our ideas that it's hard for us to look at this for what it really is, which is a much, much bigger problem that needs to be stopped. And it should not be politicized, even though even I'm politicizing it in this discourse because this is the current state of our culture. But this should not be a wavering issue, and there's no reason for a guy like James Gunn to be employed by a company the magnitude of Warner Brothers. Period. Full stop. It's time to spice up your kitchen with Pampered Chef. Pampered Chef has all the goodies from spatulas, mandolins, and amazing pots and pans, not to mention knives. Plus, don't miss out on small appliances like the deluxe air fryer and coffee maker. Spice up your kitchen today. Go to pamperedchef.com/PWS/Colleen Herman. Pamperedchef.com/PWS/Colleen Herman. And with no estate plan, you could be leaving those you love the most with high taxes, probate fees, and an incomplete or divided estate and legal fights and fees. If you live in Florida, contact RK Law for a free consultation to discuss the options you have and the tools available to protect your home, savings, and estate for those you love the most. To get started, send an email to russell@rklawpro.com or call 786-566-2456 to set up your consultation today. That's russell@rklawpro.com. And if you're in the market for a 3D printer, visit flashforge.com. With printers starting at under $300, you can begin your 3D adventures today. Visit flashforge.com. And while you're online, head over to Etsy and the Theme Park Factory. The Theme Park Factory on Etsy is a great way to support this channel. Pick up a Joe Coconut and bring a little bit of the Theme Park Factory to your home.